Good morning. This is the lymphatic flow by Rachel. Here is my board as a whole on my presentation. The little person that I have in front of you is to display the yellow part is the right lymphatic duct drains, and the rest of it is that the rest of the body gets drained by the thoracic duct. To start, we are going to start with head and neck cancer lymph nodes. There's my little picture to kind of give you an idea of where some of the lymphs are in our head. So the flow of cancerous lymph nodes spreading within the head and neck is like the lungs. When the lymph nodes become cancerous, it's a regional spread. The flow from the head and neck for lymph is that the drainage is mostly ipsilateral, but the head and the neck also have bilateral drainage as well. Superficial vessels drain from the scalp, face, and neck into the superficial ring, extending under the chin to the posterior aspect of the head, and they ultimately drain into the deep lymph nodes. These include the occipital, the mastoid, prearticular, parotid, submental, submandible, facial, and superfacial clavicle. The deep vessels of the head and neck arise from the deep cervical lymph nodes, and they include the prelaryngeal, the thyroid, the paratracheal, the lateral jugular, the anterior jugular, the jugulodigastric, jugulomohyoid, supraclavicle, the retropharyngeal, and the deep paroid. All of these deep vessels converge to form the right and the left jugular lymphatic trunks. The left jugular lymphatic trunk combines with the thoracic duct at the root of the neck, and this empties into the venous system throughout the left subclavian vein. The right jugular lymphatic trunk forms the right lymphatic duct at the root of the neck and empties into the venous system via the right subclavian vein. Next, we have the large bowels, which include the colon, the rectum, and the anus. Excuse me. So if a tumor has invaded the submucosal layer of the bowels, the initial lymphatic and venous channels of the bowel wall are found in the submucosal layer. Initial nodes that are involved in the spread of the colon cancer are the perirectal nodes, and the mechanisms of spread involve a venous drainage of the gastrinal system. Flow of lymph from the colon. The lymphatic drainage of the colon flows from the mesenteric vessels. The right colon follows the superior mesenteric vessels and includes the ileocolic and the right colic nodes. The left colon follows the inferior mesenteric vessels and includes the regional nodes termed the mid-colic, inferior mesenteric, and the left colic. The sigmoid region drains into the inferior mesenteric system, but it also includes the nodes along the superior rectal sigmoidal and sigmoidal mesenteric vessels. Flow of the rectum. Lymphatic drainage for the upper rectum follows the superior rectal vessels into the inferior mesenteric system. The middle and lower rectum drain alongside the middle rectal vessels with the principal nodule group that comprises the internal iliac nodes. Typically, so then we're going to go into anal cancer, which the lymphatic drainage for the initially the perirectal and anorectal lymph nodes are involved. If the tumor extends above the detonate line, the nodule group that is at risk is the iliac and the lateral sacral nodes. This is like rectal cancer. with the involvement below the dentinal line, inguinal lymph nodes may be involved. I did print a picture to kind of show, here's that dentinate line, so that's what they're referring to if the lymph nodes above are involved and if the lymph nodes below are involved. Also, the flow for lymph involving the anus is that above the detonate line, lymph from the anus drains into the internal iliac nodes, and below the detonate line, they flow into the superficial inguinal nodes. Next, we're going to come over to this side, and we're going to talk about cancer in the male pelvis and the lymph node spread. So typically nodes that would be involved in the male pelvis are the superficial inguinal, the pelvic, and the para-aortic. This would depend on the location of the tumor, such as the prostate, the penis, or the testes. Typically, the flow for lymph from the male pelvis would be the common iliac node drains the prostate, the external iliac node drains the prostate and the testes, the internal iliac node drains the prostate. Down a little further, we've got the prostate cancer and how that lymph node spreads. Typically, when you have cancer cells that invade the prostate, it will go from the periprostatic to the obturator nodes, followed by the external iliac, the hypogastric, common iliac, and periaortic nodes. 7% of the cases will have presacral lymph nodes, including the promedial and middle hemorrhoidal group, without evidence of metastasis in the external iliac. Hypogastric lymph nodes could be included. I have some images that kind of show you where the nodes are for the male pelvic area. And then we go down to cancer and the female pelvis and the lymph node spread there. So for the female pelvic, the pelvic pathway drains lymph from the pelvic organs in a medial chain, starting with the external iliac lymph nodes. And then it goes to the internal iliac lymph nodes, the hypogastric vessels to the junctional lymph nodes, and the tumors tend to spread along this pathway. The flow of lymph for the female pelvis, common iliac nodes drain the urinary bladder, the cervix, and the vagina. External iliac nodes drain the urinary bladder, cervix, vagina, and ovaries. The internal iliac nodes drain the vagina and the cervix and the urinary bladder. And the inguinal nodes drain the vulva, uterus, ovaries, and vagina. And again, I have an image to kind of show you where those nodules are located for the female pelvis. Next, we go into breast cancer and lymph node spread. So the first pathway is known as the principal pathway, which is also called axillary lymphatic pathway. This comes from the trunk of the upper and lower half of the breast. The lymph is collected in lobules, which follow ducts. From this point, then drain into the axilla. This pathway drains the lateral half of the breast. The axillary lymph nodes are the deep lymphatic drainage of the breast and is ipsilateral axilla. There are 10 to 38 lymph nodes in each axilla. The axilla is divided into 3 major sections. So the first section is level 1. Lymph nodes are located claudial and lateral of the pectoralis minor. This is the first station of drainage for the breast. Level 2 are under the muscles, and level 3 lymph nodes, intraclavicle lymph nodes, are located cranial and medial to the pectoralis minor. The second pathway for breast lymph nodes is internal mammary lymph nodes. They are in the peristernal space and are embedded in fat in the intercostal spaces and run alongside the corresponding artery and vein. Most internal mammary nodes are in the first, second, and third intercostal spaces. Supraclavicular nodes are located within the supraclavicle fossa, and they provide drainage for the internal mammary lymph node chain. Small number of breast tumors have direct drainage to the supraclavicle nodes. And there is kind of an image for you to see the breast cancer and the nodes that are involved in that. Lastly, we have lung cancer and the flow from the lungs. So cancer cells in the lungs can break away from the tumor mass and enter the lymphatics through two known routes. I have highlighted those two on the board so that way they're able to be seen, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about them. So the first is when the cancer cells get trapped in the nodes as the lymphatic fluid is being filtered. They begin to colonize in the nodes and will eventually pass from one node to another. This is called regional extension. The spread from node to node begins with the central mediastinal nodes, the paratracheal lymph nodes, the parahilar lymph nodes, and then the subcranial lymph nodes. The second route of spread is once the cancer cell is in the node and it begins to grow, it makes its way through the blood vessels that is supporting the lymph node with blood. The primary lymphatics that drain the lungs are the mediastinal and the intrapulmonary channels. Now, because the lungs meet up with many different vessels and lymph channels, because they meet at that intrapulmonary channel, they have the chance to spread. Once cancer is in the lungs, it can spread almost anywhere because it can get in the lymph and go to any channel it tends to flow to, it chooses to flow to, because it meets up at that juncture where everywhere meets. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, I will take those now.